Recorded Books and One Click Digital present 10 Things Every Child with Autism Wishes You Knew by Ellen Nottbaum. Narrated by Stephanie Cozart. Preface. When Children's Voice published my article 10 Things Every Child with Autism Wishes You Knew in 2004, I could scarcely have anticipated the response. Reader after reader wrote to tell me that the piece should be required reading for all social service workers, teachers, therapists, and relatives of children with autism. "Just what my daughter would say if she could," said one mother. "Screams wisdom throughout every word and sentence," said another. The article traveled from website to website around the world: United States, Canada, France, Denmark, Hungary, Croatia, Iceland, Thailand, Poland, the Netherlands, Brazil, Venezuela, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Turkey, Morocco, Dubai, Iran, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan. The sheer volume of interest and the diversity of the groups who found it relevant humbled me. They included hundreds of autism and Asperger's groups, but also support groups for chronic pain, obesity, assistance dogs, inner ear disorders, homeschoolers, religious school educators, knitting circles, food retailers. "I have a strong sense that your message crosses over to many special needs," wrote a social worker in the Midwest. 10 Things quickly took on a life of its own. Why exactly was it resonating so loudly? I decided that the resonance came from the fact that the piece spoke with a child's voice, a voice largely unheard in the rising uproar about autism. The continuing, often tumultuous dialogue is productive and welcome, but what could be more ironic than that the subjects of the discussion are widely exemplified by the inability to express and advocate for themselves? I had seen several articles that took related approaches: 10 Things Teachers Want Parents to Know, or What Mothers Wish Their Children's Teachers Knew, What Dads of Children with Autism Need to Know. When my editor, Veronica Zisk, presented me with one such adult-to-adult piece, I asked myself, who speaks for the child? "You do," came the self-reply. "Write the piece," Veronica urged. My grandmother liked to say that when you talk to yourself, you always get the answer you want. Who speaks for the child? I felt fortunate that my son Bryce's voice had been heard, thanks to committed teamwork among family members, school staff, and community resource workers. I ardently wanted his level of success to be the norm, not the exception. The original article and later this book flowed from that. Individual and collective attitudes about autism form under the influence of the language we choose in defining it. The incendiary and provocative remarks and opinions, whether intentional or thoughtless, commandeer our attention. We may respond to them, we may despair of them. But it may be the squadron of subtleties and nuances of language flying under our radar that does more to impede the development of healthy outlooks about a child's autism. Throughout the book, you will be asked to contemplate how the language of autism shapes your perspective. It will help you view autism from angles you may not have yet considered. There are also a few things you won't see. You won't see autism referred to as a disability or a disease, unless I am quoting others or sources. You won't see the word disorder, except where it applies to other conditions as part of a name, as in Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. I no longer use the term neurotypical to describe persons who don't have autism. You won't see the word autism capitalized in this book unless it's at the beginning of a sentence or part of a name or title. We don't capitalize breast cancer, diabetes, glaucoma, anorexia, depression, or other conditions that don't include someone's name, like Asperger's. Capitalizing autism makes a visual statement that assigns it an authority and power it doesn't deserve. And finally, the word normal never appears in this book outside quotation marks. The early days following our son's diagnosis of autism were spiked with questions from others along the lines of, "Do you think he'll ever learn to be normal?" I found these questions at first stupefying and later presumptuous in a manner that almost made me pity the asker. I learned to answer the question with a smile and a wink and, "When there comes a time that there is such a thing," or, "If he does, he'll be ahead of me." Then and now, I quoted Canadian songwriter Bruce Cockburn, who put it, "The trouble with normal is it always gets worse." A Word About Normal is my favorite passage from my book, 1001 Great Ideas for Teaching and Raising Children with Autism and Asperger's. In it, a middle school speech therapist answers a mother's concern that her son hasn't made many friends and might not do all the normal teen things we did. "When your son came to me last year," the speech therapist tells Mom, "his social thinking skills were almost non-existent. He didn't understand why he should say hi to people in the halls. He didn't know how to ask a question to further a conversation or how to engage with a peer during the lunch hour. Now he's working on those things. That's a huge amount of progress. But he's only made 2 friends." I would rephrase that. He's made 2 friends. One shares his interest in model trains, and one shares his interest in running. He knows how you feel, though. So I'm going to share with you what he told me the other day. He said, "I don't want a lot of friends. I can't handle a lot of friends. More than one at a time stresses me out. I can talk to these 2 friends about things I'm interested in. They're great for me." Walk through this or any other school, the SLP continues. You'll see a huge range of normal middle school behavior. You'll see nerdy normal, sporty normal, musical normal, artsy normal, techie normal. Kids tend to gravitate to groups that make them feel safe. For now, your son has found his group. You and I walk a fine line, honoring his choices while continuing to teach him the skills he needs to feel comfortable expanding his boundaries. Your child has many social selves. To embrace all of them, and therefore him as a whole child, is to redefine how we view normal, one person at a time. Although the 10 things presented in this book characterized my child, they won't and can't possibly apply in total to all children with autism. Rather, you will see some of the characteristics and needs in every child with autism in degrees that vary from child to child and from hour to hour, day to day, and year to year in an individual child. With education, therapy, and maturity, yours included, the limitations imposed by some of these characteristics may diminish, and some of those so-called limitations may be rechanneled in such a manner that you come to see them as strengths. When you reach the end of this book, and in the days that follow, you may find yourself in a new and more interesting place on your child's autism spectrum than where you started. I hope so. So, why a second edition of 10 Things Every Child with Autism Wishes You Knew, when millions have read the first edition and its appeal remains strong? Why fix something that isn't broken? In his book and film, Journey of the Universe, evolutionary philosopher Brian Thomas Swim describes the Milky Way galaxy not as a thing, but as an ongoing activity. Such is the autism spectrum, an ever-changing sphere of being within a larger universe. We travel the continuum, sometimes hurtling along, sometimes stalling out, but each particle, child, parent, teacher, sibling, grandparent, friend, stranger, has his or her own place in the sometimes elusive order of things. That spot on the spectrum shifts over time. Experience and maturity change our perspective. The years that have passed since I wrote 10 Things encompassed my son's teen years and transitions to adulthood. How could that not have altered my position on the spectrum? Those years also saw a global increase in autism that baffles and alarms everyone with a pulse, everyone but the cult-level cynics. My place on the spectrum shifted in the face of my own experiences, but also in response to the experiences of others who came into my life because of 10 Things. Some of my original thinking has morphed into larger thought. Some of it no longer seems relevant. Autism is as complex as it ever was, and the rising number of children with autism among us demands attention, even from those who would rather turn their conscience and public dollars away. We defend and advocate for our children with more eyes upon us than we did just a decade ago. By conscription, we have become not just advocates, but emissaries. Being an autism parent today requires not only stamina, curiosity, creativity, patience, resilience, and diplomacy, but the courage to think expansively and to dream accordingly. Thus, a second edition of 10 Things, faithful to its core being, but, as I have myself, ripened with time, expanded and expansive. Who speaks for the child? It does require a level of presumption to think that any one of us can get inside someone else's head and speak for them. I hope I can be forgiven for this, in the light of the overwhelming need to understand the world as the child with autism experiences it. It falls on us to grant legitimacy and worth to their different way of thinking, communicating, and navigating the world. It demands that we give voice to their thoughts and feelings, even when their voices are nonverbal. If we don't, the legacy of our children's autism will be opportunities untouched, gifts forever undiscovered. They are our call to action. It begins. As the mother of a young child with autism, I quickly learned that on some days, the only predictable thing was the unpredictability, the only consistent attribute, the inconsistency. Much about autism baffles us, even those who spend their lives around it. The child who lives with autism may look normal, but his behavior can be perplexing and downright unruly. Not so very long ago, professionals thought autism to be an incurable disorder. The notion of autism as an intractable condition with which no person can live meaningfully and productively has crumbled in the face of knowledge and understanding that continue to increase even as you read this. Every day, individuals with autism show us that they can overcome, compensate for, and otherwise manage many of autism's most challenging aspects as part of their fulfilling and dynamic lives. Many who live with autism not only do not seek a cure, but reject the concept. In a widely read New York Times article in December 2004, Jack Thomas, a 10th grader with Asperger's syndrome, got the world's attention by stating, "We don't have a disease, so we can't be cured. This is just the way we are." Jack and I are on the same page. When people who don't have autism frame its challenges only through the lens of their own experiences, they unwittingly close the door to the kind of alternative thinking that will make or break how far those with autism or Asperger's can go. Perspective is everything. When I speak to parent groups, I ask them to jot down brief descriptions of their children's most challenging behaviors and then to rephrase them in the positive. Is the child standoffish or able to entertain herself and work independently? Is she reckless or adventuresome and willing to try new experiences? Is she obsessively neat? Or does she have outstanding organizational skills? Does she pester you with endless questions? Or does she have a curiosity about her world as well as tenacity and persistence? Why do we try to fix the kid who perseverates but admire the one who perseveres? Both are forms of the same word meaning refuses to stop. Here's the one I hate the most. Does your child suffer from autism, or does he live with autism? Choose life over suffering. For 5 years, I wrote a column for Autism Asperger's Digest called Postcards from the Road Less Traveled. My editor, Veronica Zisk, and I thought the connection to Robert Frost's poem apt. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. A reader disagreed. Postcards are from people who are having a good time on a trip, he wrote. I'm not sure if that's what you want to portray. I think postcards are more than that. They let loved ones know you've arrived at a certain place safely. They say, I'm thinking of you, though I'm far away. And they share the sights so they can be with you across the distance. They may recount trip-related woes and how they resolved them, sometimes with a bit of humor. So my answer to that reader was yes. That is exactly what I want to portray in my columns, in this book, and in my dialogue with parents, professionals, and the rest of the world. I am having a good time on this trip. The trip has been fueled by hope, possibility, undreamed-of accomplishments, my son's, mine, and my whole family's, and ROI, return on investment. But we did not start out from there. We started with a basically sweet-tempered but nonverbal child who would lapse into bewildering episodes of hair-tearing, cat-scratching, furniture-throwing violence. He physically backed away from many classroom and playtime activities with his hands over his ears. He laughed at all the wrong times. He wore clothes only when socially necessary and didn't seem to experience pain or cold in a typical way. A public school intervention team identified Bryce's autism at age 3. I went through the 5 stages of grief in the time it took to end the initial meeting. My older son, Connor, had been identified 2 years earlier with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. I already knew about the therapies, the social challenges, the never-ending vigilance, and the exhaustion. Raw fear motivated me. I could not bear to imagine Bryce's fate as an adult if I did not do everything within my power to equip him to live in a world where I would not always be around. I could not rid my head of words like prison and homeless. Not for a nanosecond did it occur to me to leave his future to the professionals or to the ephemeral idea that he might outgrow his autism. His quality of life was at stake, and failure was not an option. These thoughts propelled me out of bed every morning and drove me to take the actions I did. Jump a few years ahead with me now to the turn of the 21st century. At the school assembly, adorable first graders stepped to the microphone one after another to answer the question, "What do you want to be in the new millennium?" A soccer star is a popular response. A pop singer, a race car driver, cartoon artist, veterinarian, firefighter. Bryce has considered the question carefully. I think I'd just like to be a grown-up. Applause breaks out and the principal speaks deliberately. The world would be a better place, he says, if more people aspired to what Bryce aspires to. Here is the gist of what I know to be true. Your child's autism does not mean that he, you, and your family will not lead full, joyous, meaningful lives. You may be scared, but dare to believe this with a caveat. How much of that full measure we achieve with our kids depends upon the choices we make for and about them, given their individuality and uncommon character. A memorable passage from Nora Ephron's story Heartburn has the protagonist, Rachel Samstat, asserting that when your dream breaks into a million tiny little pieces, it leaves you with a choice. You can either stick with it, which is unbearable, or you can go off and dream another dream. If you're reading this as a newcomer to the world of autism, I say, autism itself is not awful. Not understanding it, not having people around you who understand it, not getting the help that is out there for your child, that can be very awful. You're at the beginning of your journey, and we won't deny that it's a long one. And you wouldn't undertake any long journey without first learning a little about your route. This book will alert you to signposts you will likely pass along the way, so that when you do, they will have a familiar look to them and be less foreign and frightening. Some of you are already acquainted with the challenges of autism. Sport a few scars, too, I'll bet. This book can speak for you and your child to those who need to hear your message. Teachers, parents, siblings, in-laws, babysitters, coaches, bus drivers, peer parents, friends of siblings, clergy, neighbors. Pass it around. Watch the barriers fall. This book will equip those around our children with basic understanding of autism's primary elements. That understanding has a tremendous impact on the children's ability to progress toward productive, independent adulthood. Autism is complex, but throughout my experience, I've seen its myriad characteristics fall into 4 fundamental areas: sensory processing challenges, communication delays and impairments, elusive social thinking and interaction skills, and whole child self-esteem issues. All are crucial. Here's why. Sensory processing challenges. It's inescapable. A child cannot be expected to absorb cognitive or social learning, or behave, when he experiences his environment as a constant bombardment of unpleasant sensations and nasty surprises. Your brain filters thousands of multiple sensory inputs, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, etc., simultaneously. His does not. It can provoke the equivalent of 24-hour road rage as all those signals jam hopelessly in the brainstem. Think of how you feel trapped in the stifling fumes and racket of stalled traffic with no ability to affect your situation. Communication delays and impairments. Without adequate means of expression, needs and wants remain unmet. The inevitable result is anger and frustration, not learning and growing. The ability to communicate, whether through spoken language, pictures, signing, semaphore, or assistive technology, is bedrock. Social thinking and interaction skills. Elusive and ephemeral, these skills differ from culture to culture, from setting to setting within a culture, and from relationship to relationship. Inadequacy or lack of them can isolate a child to a devastating degree. The child with autism, who truly doesn't get it, paddles against a brutal current in first comprehending, then executing. Whole child self-esteem issues. Every last person on the planet is a package deal. We want to be accepted and appreciated for who we are as a whole, not a bundle of traits and quirks to be cherry-picked at will by others. The child with autism does need skilled guidance to achieve a comfortable place in the larger world. Working toward that goal with positive energy and optimism does not constitute fixing the child. They already possess much that can be celebrated. We must now go out and love and guide them with the same acceptance of whole self we want for ourselves. Bryce's successes spring from that solid sense of self-esteem, his hard-won comfort with his physical environment, and his ever-expanding ability to express himself. With those pieces in place, social and cognitive learning followed. As his life became easier, so did mine. Each passing year brought deeply gratifying feats. The day he swam to a trophy finish in a citywide swim meet, the day he sang and danced his way through Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as Grandpa Joe, the day he rode his two-wheeler for the first time, the day we worried no one would come to his birthday party and 40 people showed up. His elation at making it through his first Scout campout, and his utter euphoria after successfully working up the nerve to ask the girl he'd admired since kindergarten to dance at the sock hop, and years later to be his date for the prom. Running through 6 years on the middle school and high school track teams, brandishing his first paycheck. In time, I came to realize that I would not change him even if I could. I wouldn't take his autism away, wouldn't want to have missed any of the odyssey that made him what he is today. Though the 4 elements we've just discussed may be common to many children with autism, keep in mind that the reason we call it a spectrum is that no 2, or 10, or 20 children with autism will be completely alike. Each will be at a different point on that spectrum. And, just as importantly, every parent, teacher, and caregiver will be at a unique point in their understanding of the spectrum. Like the millions of pixels that comprise a television image, each person involved is a complicated composite. That's why there is no single recipe for success, no substitute for the research, self-education, and legwork necessary, and little window for complacency. Guiding, educating, and appreciating the child with autism will be a continual work in progress. The revered opera diva Beverly Sills, mother of 2 special needs children, once said, "There is no shortcut to any place worth going." True, but the journey can be steeped in the joy of discovery. The guidebook is in your hands. Let's get started. Here are 10 things every child with autism wishes you knew. 1. I am a child. My autism is part of who I am, not all of who I am. Are you just one thing? Or are you a person with thoughts, feelings, preferences, ideas, talents, and dreams? Are you fat, overweight, myopic, wear glasses, or klutzy, uncoordinated? Those may be things that I see first when I meet you, but you're more than just that, aren't you? As an adult, you have control over how you define yourself. If you want to single out one characteristic, you can make that known. As a child, I am still unfolding. Neither you nor I yet know what I may be capable of. If you think of me as just one thing, you run the danger of setting up an expectation that may be too low. And if I get a sense that you don't think I can do it, my natural response will be, why try? 2. My senses are out of sync. This means that ordinary sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches that you may not even notice can be downright painful for me. My environment often feels hostile. I may appear withdrawn or belligerent or mean to you, but I'm just trying to defend myself. Here's why a simple trip to the grocery store may be agonizing for me. My hearing may be hyperacute. Dozens of people jabber at once. The loudspeaker booms today's special. Music blares from the sound system. Registers beep and cough. A coffee grinder chugs. The meat cutter screeches, babies wail, carts creak. The fluorescent lighting hums. My brain can't filter all the input and I'm in overload. My sense of smell may be highly sensitive. The fish at the meat counter isn't quite fresh. The guy standing next to us hasn't showered today. The deli is handing out sausage samples. The baby in line ahead of us has a poopy diaper. They're mopping up pickles on aisle 3 with ammonia. I feel like throwing up. And there's so much hitting my eyes. The fluorescent light is not only too bright, it flickers. The space seems to be moving. The pulsating light bounces off everything and distorts what I'm seeing. There are too many items for me to be able to focus. My brain may compensate with tunnel vision. Swirling fans on the ceiling, so many bodies in constant motion. All this affects how I feel just standing there, and now I can't even tell where my body is in space. 3. Distinguish between won't, I choose not to, and can't, I am not able to. It isn't that I don't listen to instructions. It's that I can't understand you. When you call to me from across the room, I hear blah, 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 Jordan, blah, blah, blah. Instead, come over to me, get my attention, and speak in plain words. Jordan, put your book in your desk. It's time to go to lunch. This tells me what you want me to do and what is going to happen next. Now it's much easier for me to comply. 4. I'm a concrete thinker. I interpret language literally. You confuse me by saying, "Hold your horses, cowboy," when what you mean is, "Stop running." Don't tell me something is a piece of cake when there's no dessert in sight and what you mean is, "This will be easy for you to do." When you say, "It's pouring cats and dogs," I see pets coming out of a pitcher. Tell me, "It's raining hard." Idioms, puns, nuances, inferences, metaphors, allusions, and sarcasm are lost on me. 5. Listen to all the ways I'm trying to communicate. It's hard for me to tell you what I need when I don't have a way to describe my feelings. I may be hungry, frustrated, frightened, or confused, but right now I can't find those words. Be alert for body language, withdrawal, agitation, or other signs that tell you something is wrong. They're there. Or you may hear me compensate for not having all the words I need by sounding like a little professor or movie star, rattling off words or whole scripts well beyond my developmental age. I've memorized these messages from the world around me because I know I am expected to speak when spoken to. They may come from books, television, or the speech of other people. Grown-ups call it echolalia. I may not understand the context or the terminology I'm using. I just know that it gets me off the hook for coming up with a reply. 6. Picture this. I'm visually oriented. Show me how to do something rather than just telling me. And be prepared to show me many times. Lots of patient practice helps me learn. Visual supports help me move through my day. They relieve me of the stress of having to remember what comes next, make for smooth transition between activities, and help me manage my time and meet your expectations. I need to see something to learn it. Because spoken words are like steam to me, they evaporate in an instant, before I have a chance to make sense of them. I don't have instant processing skills. Instructions and information presented to me visually can stay in front of me for as long as I need, and will be just the same when I come back to them later. Without this, I live the constant frustration of knowing that I'm missing big blocks of information and expectations and am helpless to do anything about it. 7. Focus and build on what I can do rather than what I can't do. Like any person, I can't learn in an environment where I'm constantly made to feel that I'm not good enough and that I need fixing. I avoid trying anything new when I'm sure all I'll get is criticism, no matter how constructive you think you're being. Look for my strengths, and you will find them. There is more than one right way to do most things. 8. Help me with social interactions. It may look like I don't want to play with the other kids on the playground, but it may be that I simply don't know how to start a conversation or join their play. Teach me how to play with others. Encourage other children to invite me to play along. I might be delighted to be included. I do best in structured play activities that have a clear beginning and end. I don't know how to read facial expressions, body language, or the emotions of others. Coach me. If I laugh when Emily falls off the slide, it's not that I think it's funny. It's that I don't know what to say. Talk to me about Emily's feelings and teach me to ask, "Are you okay?" 9. Identify what triggers my meltdowns. Meltdowns and blow-ups are more horrid for me than they are for you. They occur because one or more of my senses has gone into overload or because I've been pushed past the limit of my social abilities. If you can figure out why my meltdowns occur, they can be prevented. Keep a log noting times, settings, people, and activities. A pattern may emerge. Remember that everything I do is a form of communication. It tells you when my words cannot, how I'm reacting to what is happening around me. My behavior may have a physical cause. Food allergies and sensitivities, sleep problems, and gastrointestinal problems can all affect my behavior. Look for signs, because I may not be able to tell you about these things. 10. Love me unconditionally. Throw away thoughts like, "If you would just," and "Why can't you?" You didn't fulfill every expectation your parents had for you, and you wouldn't like being constantly reminded of it. I didn't choose to have autism. Remember that it's happening to me, not you. Without your support, my chances of growing up to be successful and independent are slim. With your support and guidance, the possibilities are broader than you might think. 3 words we both need to live by: patience, patience, patience. View my autism as a different ability rather than a disability. Look past what you may see as limitations and see my strengths. I may not be good at eye contact or conversation, but have you noticed that I don't lie, cheat at games, or pass judgment on other people? I rely on you. All that I might become won't happen without you as my foundation. Be my advocate, be my guide, love me for who I am, and we'll see how far I can go. Chapter 1. I am a whole child. Are you familiar